What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, I'm doing round 2 with Rob Moran from Unbroken. So we're picking up where we left off last time, and we're going all the way through to present day. Also, two things. First off, you got to pre-order the new Retaliate record. Go to indecisionrecords.com and handle business. Also, tomorrow is election day, so you got to go out and vote. And, come up with a plan. If you haven't already voted, figure out how you're going to do it. Also, if you think you missed your opportunity and you didn't register to vote, there are a ton of states that have same-day voter registration. So you can go register at the polls and vote. Here are the states you can do that in: California, Colorado, Connecticut, D.C., Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, Washington, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. If you live in those states, there is same-day voter registration, so get out there and handle business. Please support the pod by subscribing to it wherever you listen to it. Also, please like, rate, and review it. If you want to go the extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/185 miles south and become a Patreon. For all the interview podcasts, I'm trying to do a bonus Patreon episode where I have some people on and we talk about that podcast. We also go through a discography of the person I interviewed. Also, there's a playlist for every episode. Just go to the website, 185milessouth.com, and click that playlist link. Now, let's get on with the pod.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, you know him, you love him. He's actually episode 49. It's part 2 of Rob Moran. What's up, Rob?
What's up, Zach? How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm just glad to have you back. You know, it's like episode 1, we decided to, or your first episode, we were going a little long. We decided to cut it off and do a part 2. And then it's hard to know where to slide in the part 2. You know, like,
Yeah.
Do you do it the following week? Like I did that with the first Todd episode, or do you let it like breathe a little bit? So I'm just glad to have you back.
Yeah. I think it's great that you let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah. You gotta make them wait for it, you know? So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's so popular. Million.
I mean, you were one of the more popular guests. So you know this, Rob, you low rate your popularity a lot. You know?
I just try not to. Yeah. Okay, cool. Humble brag. How about that?
There you go. So the last time we wrapped up, and I should just say, the first interview we did in person, this is now COVID time, so we're on the phone, even though we live in the same city. So kind of awkward, but bear with us, dudes. We're doing what we can do. I think that the last pod we ended with you leaving Kill Holiday, which is an easy story to remember because you went and saw Danzig
and Marilyn Manson's first U.S. San Diego show, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and that shows a little bit of like a generation gap between the two of us because, like, for me, I just remember Marilyn Manson kind of being like a mall metal band, you know, but was it actually like kind of edgy at the time if you were into it?
Yeah, I would say it straddled the line of mall metal, Hot Topic. So I think it became Hot Topic post like Antichrist Superstar. Like prior to that, it was I don't know. I think I've always just been kind of into weird shit musically, and I don't know if Marilyn Manson's weird or not, but just I don't know, eclectic. I would say I like a lot of different things, and so for me, it just sounded heavy and brutal, and I thought the imagery was cool, and it was just strange and weird. So I didn't really think anything of it at the time. But yeah, I think after Antichrist Superstars, I would consider it full mall metal, Hot Topic genre.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so you leave Kill Holiday, and then I don't know the gap between that and Unbroken doing a reunion. So what do you do when you leave Kill Holiday after the Danzig show?
Um, after the dancing show.
Immediately after the
Uh,
Danzig show. First off, where do you go?
yeah, I
Where do you
mean,
go to eat, and then what do you do?
I don't remember. But yeah, I don't know. It was kind of, I moved up to Orange County and moved in with Hartsfield and Mandel to go work at New Age. Actually, I knew how to silk screen, and I still know how to silk screen, and so I had a job in San Diego, like in between tours, like doing silk screening and stuff. And I Mike needed a silk screener, and he's like, "You're not doing anything. Like, why don't you move up here and just work at Network Sound?" With me and Dennis, and you could silk screen. So a lot, pretty much any, I would say probably 90% of the shirts from uh, mid '95 through 97 were probably screened by me.
So India Redemption 87 shirt was done by you.
Yeah, I did Redemption 87, Resurrection, Lifetime, Turning Point, Unbroken stuff. Like, I did it all. I worked there for about probably a year and a half, something like that. Um, and then the place we were all living in was this like condo, and we were all moving out, and so me and Mandel um, decided to move in together in Westminster, and at the same time, just friendly with Jordan Cooper at Rev, and just would pop by there all the time and talk and go play arcade games, whatever, with him. And we just started talking, and I said, "What are you ever going to do with Crisis Records? Like, what was the deal with that?" And he kind of gave me the backstory, and I was like, "Why don't you reactivate it?" And he goes, "Yeah, kind of a good idea." And then like a week later, he's like, "Do you want to like reactivate the label and start bringing bands in, and you can work at Rev and in between?" And I said, "Sure." And so I ended up working at Rev for a while as a rep and working sales basically, and help silk screen sometimes when Dave Stein would go out of town. Um, and Yeah, and started signing bands to Crisis and um, doing helping mail order, silk screen sales to record shops, and yeah, it was a great time. And then my mom had surgery, and I had to move back to San Diego to take care of her for about 4 months. And Rev needed help with a couple tours, and so I did the Battery 10 Yard Fight U.S. tour. I booked that and a few other things. Did a few legs of an Iceburn tour and a couple other things, and then got a job at a record shop and worked there for a while, and then got a job in fraud prevention and started doing that for e-commerce companies, and I've been doing that type of work ever since, and then started doing bands again like in the late '90s. So it kind of just floated around with like different jobs here and there until I kind of landed on a career, but started doing bands again, like 98, 99, started getting back into playing again.
Yeah, that'll lead us right into doing Over My Dead Body. But let me just ask about Crisis briefly. What was
Yeah.
the point of that label? Because like 90s Rev is pretty eclectic. Why have like a spin-off label?
From what I remember and kind of what Jordan was telling me, that it was kind of stemmed from Walter. Like he wanted to do something, kind of wanted to get a label going and like put out friends bands and kind of just do some different things. And then that's kind of how Crisis started. Like putting out a few different records, like Onion and um, I think a few other releases and stuff. I think he put out like 5 or 6 releases maybe before he stopped. And so, yeah, and then he just, probably got busy with Quicksand and other things, and then kind of, it kind of just trailed off for him, and they just left it alone. And then, yeah, and that was kind of the point. It was just kind of a sub label to put out bands that might not fit, aka the Rev mold, but you know, they still wanted to support, and that's kind of what it was. But yeah, that part I never kind of really understood because they started to put out different types of music on Rev by that point. By the time that label was going, it wasn't just like strictly, you know, heavy hardcore type stuff. They were doing a little bit of everything by that point. And so, but yeah, I think it was mainly just for Walter to put some stuff out. And then I took it over in the mid 90s.
Is there anything that stands out from that time, like that you put out or had your hands in that like you're still really proud of now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Shai Hulud stuff. I mean, that stuff was phenomenal. And then I love the Chinchilla record still. It's phenomenal, like band from San Diego. They kind of like a Casbah band, like they used to play this local venue in San Diego called the Casbah. It's pretty legendary. It's been around since late '80s, early '90s, and it's kind of like San Diego's CBs. Like everyone played there: Mudhoney, Nirvana, Laughing Hyenas, White Stripes, The Strokes. There's like over the years, like up and coming bands all pass through and play that place. And so, but Chinchilla was like one of those bands that kind of played that club a lot. And Julie, who's one of the main songwriters in that band, I worked with her at this record store in San Diego called Off the Record, and thought she was talented, and so was her band, and so I put them out. And so yeah, I mean those things I'm like really proud of. And you know, the Beta Minus Mechanic was interesting and different and kind of poppy, kind of had an Ashes vibe to it. And, you know, so yeah, I like everything that I was able to put out with that label.
So jumping into Over My Dead Body, first off, what makes you want to do a band again? And then also like, where do you think the San Diego scene was at that time? And like, what were like the goals? Like, was there an overarching goal of wanting to play music again, or did you just want to have fun with your friends, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it was. I mean, there was bands, you know, like Built to Last and NIV and a few other bands like that that were playing shows in San Diego. And, you know, I was still going to shows, you know, I was still booking shows in town for bands, and, you know, booked Botch and Ink and Dagger and Phaser Day and At the Drive-In, Jimmy Eat World. Like I booked a lot of shows still. So I still like heavily involved in the scene and doing shows. But I just wasn't playing music. It just like wasn't, I felt I just needed to take a break from it for a while. Because it was just, I don't know. I think I was scared to play again because I didn't think anything I would do could ever live up to what I was in. And so I was always scared that anything I do would be compared to Unbroken. And which it is, I guess, but I had to get over that, and it took a long time to get over that. Um, and so when Daniel approached me and was like, "Hey," and Daniel and Aaron were like, "Oh, we got this band. Do you want to play?" And it sounded great. And I went to a couple practices and kind of picked up the songs pretty quick. And then we just started writing music, and then it was just fun. Like for me, it was just about having fun and playing in a hardcore band that was different than anything I'd ever done. It was kind of 7 seconds, kind of um, uh, kind of heavy, and I don't know. It was just a little different than anything I'd played musically before. Like when it comes to hardcore, and so I was playing with my friends. So for me, it was just for fun and to do a straight edge band and have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more straightforward than the stuff you'd done. I mean, I never heard the band that you played drums for your first band, right? Didn't you say that on
Yeah,
the previous?
yeah, humor, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I still haven't tracked that down yet, but yeah, I don't know how that sounded, but this is like, you know, a more straightforward hardcore lane. And just to jump
Yeah,
back a
for sure.
tad, Rob, did you do the Saves the Day show at the Shea?
No, I did the one before that at the Empire Club. So it was their very first show. They opened for Bean. It was Bane and Saves the Day. It was both their first shows in San Diego.
Yeah,
And they did that.
I didn't come for that. I saw that show at the showcase. And that's like when it merged with that the battery tenor fight too, I think, right? That you were booking, like those all converged.
Yeah, I don't remember that happening at the showcase. I wasn't at the showcase show, so I don't really remember what who all played at that. But yeah, the Bane and Saves the Day show. I think it was had to be 97, 98, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, so good.
When when that show happened.
That rules.
So
So
yeah.
jumping into Over My Body, um, what do you remember about like recording the demo and like how did it feel to like have the piece of music in your hand? How were you objectively feeling about it?
I was objectively happy. I thought the demo was fun. It sounded cool. I don't think there was anything on there that I wasn't stoked about. And I was ready. Like, okay, like let's put out a 7 inch and see where this goes, and let's have fun and start to play out and um, and just see like what the vibe is, if people are into this or not. And I was nervous. I still get like horrible nerves playing shows, and so to like come back and start playing in a hardcore band, plus like being scared of what are people going to think of it, and then just the nerves of playing in general. So it was the first few shows were really nerve wracking for me, but they ended up always being really fun.
Do you remember the first show by any chance?
No, not particularly, but I just remember that first like 6 months when we started playing out, that it was fun. Like it was fun. The response was great. People were into it. We were into it. There's just always a good energy. Like that part I remember pretty vividly. It's just kind of the energy and vibe of the shows.
Yeah, I mean that time is like such a crucial time for a lot of San Diego kids that are still around now. I mean, if you talk to like Kim Possible or Anthony Guzman, like these are like punk and hardcore lifers now from here, and like you're one of the first bands that that they could regularly go to shows to, and that vibe that Over My Body gave off is like very inclusive, right?
Yeah, and that was the whole point of the band. It was like, yeah, we're straight edge and stuff, but it doesn't mean that's all we are. It doesn't mean that punks or whatever crust kids or whatever you're into doesn't mean we can't all just have fun, right? And that was the whole point of it, was trying to make an inclusive scene in San Diego and not have people like be worried that they're going to be judged or made fun of because they're into different things. And that was, I think, why like on that 7 inch there was so many different covers, right, of just different things to kind of say like, hey, we like all kinds of different music. It doesn't have to be just hardcore. And that vibe kind of stuck through the whole way with the band, I thought.
Yeah, so the demo, and then you do a split with Swindle. Those both come out in the year 2000. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and 2001 is like pretty busy for a young band because you do the No Runner 7 inch, you do a split with Time X on Fight, and you do your first LP. But let's talk about the 7 inch first, because this for I like everything you guys did, but this 7 inch is like maybe the most palatable, just because a lot of times hardcore is best in 7 inch format, and you have two of your shorter and best songs on here, the theme song, the Over My Body song, and then also Be There, which I think is like the best Over My Body song. Um, that song stands out for you as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I love Be There. I wrote that song. I didn't write the lyrics, but I wrote the music for it, and I and I just remember Aaron telling me, he's like, you can't just have one riff the whole way through. And I was like, oh, you can. Like, watch, I'll show you. We'll change up the speed and we'll go fast and slow, but using the same uh, pattern, the same riff pattern. And it kind of like changed a little bit for him. He's like realized like, oh, wow, like you can do that. It does sound cool, actually. And so it was, yeah, I love that song. Like Be There was always one of my favorite songs to play. The OMDB theme song was great. I believe Aaron wrote that one. But yeah, it was really fun recording that record and interesting enough. And I don't know if Daniel's ever talked about this on the podcast, but when we recorded that 7-inch, a lot of people don't know for as much into music Daniel is, he has pretty bad rhythm. And while we were recording the 7-inch, he was consistently about a half beat behind the music the whole time. And we recorded at double time. Jeff was losing his mind. Like, what is going on? Like, why is he behind? And I said, I don't know. I need to go figure it out. So I started talking to Daniel. I said, look, I'm going to start tapping your back. So while he was singing on the 7-inch, I'm sitting behind him, tapping his lower back to give him rhythm so he doesn't lose the cadence. And that's how he did the vocals.
This is the most erotic 7-inch ever.
It's very erotic. Yeah,
it
was sexy. Yeah.
That's great. Daniel, fuck, he's like a few years too early for Pro Tools because they could have just moved him.
You know? Yeah, they could have spotted him up.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, now you just lay it down. It's like, hey, Roger, give me a little nudge, you know?
Yeah.
So easy. But yeah, I mean, recording to tape is something else.
Yeah, and I think that was the last time like OMDB recorded to tape. I think for that and the split with Timex. Those are the last times we record on tape, and after that, everything started being Pro Tools driven.
So for the LP, the Rusty Medals and Broken Badges, how do you record it, and where do you record it?
Shit, I don't remember. Was it double time?
I shouldn't put you on the spot like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if double time. Well, fuck, we recorded in 01 and double time. It was still like too a reel.
Yeah.
So that might have been the last time. And maybe Daniel just got better by then of being able to sing on time.
Yeah, I only ever had to do it on the 7-inch. I didn't have to do that on the subsequent releases. You know, I don't remember much about recording the LP. I remember it being very rushed. I remember it being, we got to get more songs. We have to just push. And I think some songs I think definitely hold up and sound great. And then a lot of it is just boring hardcore. I don't think it was that great of a record. It's very like middle of the road. There's a few standout tracks, but by and large, it's a pretty middle of the road record, I thought. And still, like, I think I listened to it a few years ago and I was like, geez, like, this is a very boring album. But I think it was because we were putting out so much music and we just kept getting volunteered for split 7-inches left and right and comps and this and that songs just kept going out the door. And some of them were really, really good and just like would have been better served if we would have saved them for the LP, I think. But yeah, I think I don't remember the recording really much at all, other than being kind of rushed to write songs.
And why do you feel like maybe you didn't jump in and tell the band to hold back a bit? Because like the last LP that you had done as a musician was like, you know, a hardcore masterpiece, right? Where you went in with like full intention and walked out of the studio with like what you wanted to accomplish.
I just think I felt more of like taking a back seat because I joined the band like kind of after they started. And yeah, like I wrote a lot of songs, but I also felt that, I don't know, I would just kind of go with majority. Like, what does the majority want to do? And I would just leave it to that, you know, and I don't remember really ever putting my foot down, but I think we have like 5 split 7-inches or something like that. Like, it's crazy. And, you know, I think some of those songs, like I said, could have been better served on the LP. And I don't know. I think I just kind of took a back seat and just let majority rule. I think I just didn't want to. I was just kind of like, yeah, sure, go with the flow, like whatever you want to do, like, you know. And I think like when going through the LP, that's when it kind of started to not be as fun for me, because I think I the reason I don't remember is maybe I just didn't have any fun making making the record, and so it's just kind of lost to memory for me. But you know, I think when we did that split 7 inch afterwards with Death Threat, I got really excited because I was super into those songs. Um, and that got me really stoked on the band again and touring. I thought was great on those records. But yeah, the LP was a bit of a wash for me.
Yeah, you play a lot of like big shows and short tour runs out the gate. I don't remember the time frame on them, but like you do a run with like American Nightmare, right? And I think you did East Coast with Carry On Death Threat.
Yeah, Carry On, Death Threat. We did stuff with like Bane and HopeCon on the East Coast, AN and uh, show, and then we did stuff with Panic and Breaker Breaker on the West Coast, and so yeah, we had a lot of runs like up and down and around the U.S. for sure. Yeah, we got pretty lucky. I mean, it worked out just because I booked tours and I met so many people that it was pretty easy to just keep that going. And hey, I got this new band, we're coming to town, like or reaching out to promoters and booking agents that I know and say, hey, like I've done you a million favors for bands that have come to San Diego, like can you help us out and get us on a tour or book a few shows for us? And it always kind of worked out, like people like Matt Pike were always super generous of helping us get on some shows and kind of getting us on the inside lane on some tours and stuff as well. So it's always been great to be able to keep like these friendships for so long. And it's not about like, hey, give and take. It's just like, hey, this isn't just about us doing favors. We're friends beyond that. And so many people have been generous with their time and really helped the band out a lot. I mean, even people like Mandel of taking a chance and just putting out the records was great on its own. So,
How did you feel like being back on the East Coast and like touring for the first time since you did it with Unbroken?
I was so excited. I mean, being able to play, CBs for the first time with OMDB and being able to, see all my friends again out there and play venues that I love to play at and play new ones that I grow into loving. It was awesome and it was good. I mean, some of the shows were great, well attended and great energy, and then some shows were meh, but overall we got a pretty good reaction at most places, and we've been pretty lucky when we would come to town. Most of the shows were pretty solid. Especially, it helped to be on good tours. You're touring with Bane and HopeCon or Carry On and Death Threat, and like every show on the East Coast is a banger because there's tons of kids coming out for those bands alone, and then you pick up some new fans along the way. So we got pretty lucky.
Are there any stand-up memories from either of those East Coast tours?
Yeah, I mean, I think shows in Richmond were amazing. Obviously, playing CBs was great. Boston was really good. We even had a great show in Syracuse. There was like a good amount of kids that came out, and so yeah, I mean, the East Coast shows were pretty great, for the most part, and we were pretty fortunate to have enough kids come out to make the shows fun. So yeah, I mean, those were some of the standout cities that I remember.
Now, I know firsthand about your the Panic West Coast tour because I drove up. I think you guys drove back, but we went in my van, and
That's right.
it was super fun. Yeah, like that spot you played in Portland to like almost no one was like sick, and then the Seattle show was amazing.
Yeah, I remember Portland being so crazy. We played this giant venue. Maybe it was called the Roseland or the Rose. Like I don't remember. I think it was called the Roseland. I don't. It definitely held about 500 to 600 people, and I think they had like 40 paid people that night.
Yeah.
And so we're playing this giant venue with nobody in it, but everyone made the most of it. They made the best of it, and it was still ended up being a fun time, and there was just still a fun energy with it. But it was just so absurd to be playing in this giant room with nobody in it.
And kind of
You know,
like a pretty room, right? Like I remember it being like kind of a pretty ballroom.
yeah, no, it was. Yeah, it was really pretty, and I think that it's funny because when you're like playing in like small venues and there's not a lot of people, it doesn't really matter. You're just like whatever. You just play and have fun and make the best of it. But when you're playing these humongous places and there's nobody there, it's real interesting case study in the human psyche of like looking out and like feeling so strange that you're up on this humongous stage with video monitors and you just look out to a sea of nobody. Um, and it was, yeah, it definitely plays some mind tricks. It felt so weird, and then you just got to laugh about it to get through it because it's just so absurd.
Well, and you recover, right? Because like the next night in Seattle was like huge and giant dog pile on stage. Like it was ill.
Yeah, the Seattle show was insane. I think that was at the Vera Project. Um, yeah, and that show was bonkers. There's so many kids and just a crazy energy and super wild. It was fun. That was a great show.
And how does that feel? Because like that bond between you and a lot of the Seattle guys, and also just San Diego in general, and like the Pacific Northwest, like how does that feel being able to come back with your newer project and having it set off like that?
Oh, it was great. I mean, being able to, see friends from various bands up there and just people that I've known forever and, reconnect with those people and have a great show. It just like it feels great because it just like gives you a lot of meaning behind what you do. It makes you feel great that you're getting to travel to these cities to see your friends and then play a big show. And it's like the best of both worlds. You have a great night out, plus you get to see friends that you've known by that point, you know, 10, 15 years. And so it's a great feeling. And that show is definitely one that stood out for sure for that band.
Do you have any memories of the In Control van?
Yeah, I remember it always wondering if it was going to break down. And then I remember the little flap on the back that, like, if you had to go to the bathroom, you can just lay down on the floor and pee through the hole in the floor so you didn't have to stop. You could just keep going. And I did use that hole, and it was great because I had to piss so bad. And you feel bad. You don't want to have everyone like pull the van over. So you're just like, well, I'll just use this little hole here, and it was great. I got to do my business, and then just roll back over, go to sleep or whatever. So yeah, yeah, that was fun. And then yeah, I just remember a lot of shit talking as
Yeah.
well.
We show
Yeah.
respect. We show respect for Gatorade bottles in the In Control van. Don't pee in the bottle. Just go down the hole.
Yeah, go the hole.
Yeah, so good. Um, you do this below Death Threat, and then you leave the band before the second LP, correct? Although you do participate in the LP.
Yeah, so yeah, we did the Death Threat split, and then the album was like mostly written. I think I had about 6 songs for it. I think I wrote like 3 or 4 of them, um, and and then it just got to a point where I don't know, I just kind of stopped feeling it, and they wanted to do more and more and more, and I was like, I don't know, I need to like take a step back and maybe you guys have someone that could give more to this than I can, So, I kind of took a step back and started Some Girls um, during that time, and then when they went to record the second album with Paul Miner up at Dave's house, I went there and did some backup vocals on a few songs, and um, yeah, and hung out there for a couple of days and then came home. So it was like nothing ill, at all. It was just I wasn't just 100% into it anymore. So I kind of decided to take a step back.
Do you remember the talk that you had to have, like breaching it, and how like weird it felt? Because it's so hard to like leave a band.
Yeah, I just kind of said, I remember talking to Daniel and Aaron and Tommy and just kind of saying, hey, like, I love you guys and nothing ill, but I'm just like not feeling this. And, do you guys want to keep going? Do you want to get something else? Like, I can help kind of finish writing some songs. And then it kind of worked out. They, had some replacement people, um, that kind of worked out perfectly fine. So I think like they were bummed, but it wasn't like I was like, fuck you guys, I'm out of here. It was very much like respectful, yeah, because I love those guys, but it's just I just wasn't feeling it as much. So I needed to kind of step back. And like it just didn't feel right, like taking up space for something that I wasn't fully into as much. And so, yeah, it was, yeah, awkward, of course, but it wasn't anything ill at all. I mean, obviously, I'm still all tight with those guys.
Yeah. How do you compare the second LP to the first?
The second LP is great. I love it. I think it's really good songs, some clever like lyrical things, and just better songwriting. I think it's a better paced record. I think, and it's more dynamic, and it just sounds better. Um, Overall, I think the second LP is fantastic.
Yeah, is that weird? Like your next band that does LPs, like it's two bands in a row where the second LP is better. It's a rarity in hardcore, right? Because it's very most hardcore bands don't do a second record, and then like for you to be in two bands in a row that the second record is actually better, that's fucking wild.
Yeah, it's like avoid the sophomore jinx, right? We have the first album flop or whatever you want to call it, but not that the first record's terrible, it's just not great, and I mean, it's like what we talked about with Ritual. Like, it's not a terrible record. It's just not great, and it's full of mediocrity. And that's how I felt about this first OMDB record. Where the second one is dynamic and interesting on multiple levels, and I think that's why it's a superior album.
Let's talk about starting Some Girls. How does the idea come about?
So OMDB and AN were on tour and on the West Coast, and Wes and I had already kind of been friendly for a while through like emails and meeting him when OMDB played Back to School Jam in Worcester, and I stayed at his house that night and we just hit it off and talked, I don't know, till like 4 or 5 in the morning about music, and it just kind of stayed in touch. And then they were coming out and they're like, yeah, why don't you guys play with us? So, we did like 7 or 8 shows with them up the West Coast. And we just started talking about music, and it'd be fun to do something interesting and different and kind of old San Diego kind of swing kids, heroin, Antioch Arrow type stuff. And he was all into those Gravity, early 3-1G bands. And I believe American Nightmare was going to Europe, but they were leaving out of LAX. So they had about, or maybe they were leaving the East Coast, I don't know. But he had about 5 days to kill. And I was like, well, why don't you come to San Diego? You can crash with me or stay with friends, whatever, down there. And, a friend of mine, Sal, has a recording studio, and maybe we can just try to hammer out some music and just kind of see what happens. And so thought it was a good idea, and that's how Some Girls started.
Was Ben in an early incarnation of Some Girls?
Just on a live show one time.
So he played with you once?
Yeah.
And then Justin joins?
Yeah, and then Justin joins. So, but originally the first 7 inch and the demo was just me playing guitar and bass on everything, and then Wes doing vocals and Sal doing the drums in the recording.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
how do you feel about doing the first one? Is the first one the blues or the rains?
the Rains.
Okay. And how do you feel about that? Like, what's your feeling when you get that done? Was it like what you went in and set out to do?
Yeah, it encompassed everything: frantic, manic, collapsing punk. Like it is just hanging on by a thread, and it's all spur of the moment. It's all feeling, and it's just a ripping 7 inch. I love that record still. One of my favorite things that we had ever done as a band because it was just so earnest and just not really methodical. It was like we kind of want to sound like this, and then we just did it. Um, and so when we had the the demo was done, but we didn't have the 7 inch was done, but we didn't have vocals to it yet because Wes was back in Boston still, and so we were sending the reels out for him to do the vocals out there. And I played the 7 inch or the recording for Justin with all the vocals, and I said, "Hey, there's no vocals here yet. They're coming, but does this interest you at all?" And he's like, "I don't know, maybe." And he wasn't really that interested. And then when the record was done, I remember Justin calling me saying, "Oh my God, like I can't believe I didn't put this record out. Like I totally screwed up. This 7 inch is insane." And so it was great that Death Wish took a chance and just said, "Hey, like we want to put this record out, and it sounds interesting, and we love you guys, and let's just see what happens with this band." And so that's kind of how the band started. We just did that demo and then the 7 inch, the Rains, and then did the blues after that.
Yeah, and because he skipped on the first one, you're like, you don't get the second one either, stupid. So we're doing the second one
Yeah.
on Death Wish too.
Yeah.
Not that he's stupid; he's probably much smarter than me. But
Uh,
just a phrase. Don't get mad.
but then it was like, Wes was like, "I think I want to move to San Diego," and AN's breaking up. Um, some girls was on tour and on the East Coast, and they would get AN was getting ready to go to Europe, and Wes was like, I don't think I want to go, and um, and so he ended up like just staying in San Diego basically, and worked on just more record stuff, with some girls, and did the blues, and then did the LP and the DNA 7 inch. And so, yeah, it was great to put that band together and have fun and do something that wasn't really happening in hardcore at the time. It wasn't quite grindcore. It wasn't quite regular kind of standard hardcore. It was kind of a throwback to, late 80s, early 90s San Diego bands. And it was fun to play something like that wasn't really happening at the time in hardcore. And so after we put out that first 7 inch, we decided, hey, we should start playing shows for real. We should start to like fill out the band and add more people. And so, yeah, we got Justin to play bass, and then Christopher from Tristeza was playing guitar for a while, and did a couple tours, and then we got Chuck from the Plot to Blow Up Eiffel Tower, played when Christopher moved away. And so it was kind of a revolving cast of second guitar players for a while until we settled on Chuck.
How did it feel like once Justin's in the band and you have you, Wes, and Justin? Like, did it feel strange being like kind of a hardcore all-star band at all?
I mean, I never thought about it that way. I just felt that, I was like just playing with my friends, and because Justin I'd known for so long, and Wes I'd known for, a year or two by this point. And so for me, it just felt like I was just playing with my friends. I mean, even I think the first couple records is just says Some Girls Is Us and Us Only. It doesn't even name who's in the band. And that was kind of like by design to just say, hey, like, it doesn't matter who's in the band. Just listen to this record. And if you like it, cool. And if not, like, that's cool too. And so it was very, that kind of just didn't matter. You know, I never even really thought about it that way, I guess, until you brought it up right now. It just felt more like I'm just playing with my friends.
Sorry to make you feel awkward, dude. Never my intention.
No, it's okay. You're good at it, though.
I do want to step back a bit and just talk about your relationship with Wes, because it does seem like you connect on multiple levels. Like, we've talked before about you not really connecting with like some of the late 90s youth crew revival, and then American Nightmare and Bane being like two of the bands that grabbed you and like made you excited about hardcore again. And I'm assuming, and that's always a terrible thing to do, but I'm assuming that he was like an Unbroken fan. So well, first off, is that true before I continue?
Yeah, I mean, he liked the band. Yeah.
Okay. So like you have this mutual respect for each other, like in the bands you're in, plus you like a lot of the same genre, like the genres of like non-hardcore music. So like, is that a lot of your kinship?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like kind of how we met. You know, he got introduced through a mutual friend at Back to School Jam and to me, and then we just, hit it off. Like I said, just talking about music and different stuff and traveling and, him growing up in a military family and that type of thing. And so it was, yeah, we just hit it off, like I would say mainly over music, and that was kind of the big part of our friendship in the beginning. And so, yeah, I guess you could say, yeah, because it's absolutely true. Like I wasn't like a huge youth crew revival person. There was very few bands in that genre that like I was genuinely into. It wasn't like I like hated hardcore during that time. It just wasn't as exciting to me until kind of, Hope Con and Bane and AN came out. That like, totally, um, in striking distance, like that type of stuff, like got me super pumped on hardcore. It wasn't that I was like not into hardcore at the time. I just wasn't as excited about what was going on. And then these bands all kind of created this like drive for me to like want to play music again and to want to see these bands um and and to this day, I mean, I could say that those bands definitely like reinvigorated my love for hardcore for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted to touch on it, because I think it encompasses two of the greatest things about hardcore. Like, one is that there's always going to be something coming that excites you, right? And so, like, there's ebbs and flows, and maybe you're not into everything. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you're hating on it or whatever, but something's always going to come out and be wild. Like, if you look at this year, like the way that people grabbed onto Gulch, like, what a
Yeah.
sick band to come out of kind of nowhere and to excite everyone.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And the other thing is just, I think it's amazing in hardcore that you can kind of like run in these circles that are like adjacent to each other, like the friendship circles, and you can connect to people like later in life. And it's like you meet someone in your 30s or your 40s or, even your 20s, and like become best friends with someone. Like, that's amazing, And so,
Yeah, that's beautiful about hardcore. I agree.
yeah, just because like you can meet people that have like, similar interests and backgrounds like later in life. I don't know what other subcultures or like societies like that is available. And so it's just one of the things that I love about hardcore and wanted to highlight. So thank you for letting me go there.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Um, so you do the LP, the All My Friends Are Going Deaf.
Yeah, so that's kind of a collection with some extra tracks on it. So we, um, we were going to be touring more, and we decided, okay, we're actually going to start playing shows like for real and trying to make things happen. And we, you know, decided like let's put both 7 inches on one LP plus the demo plus record like 3 new songs. So
Right.
it kind of fills out a little bit. So that's kind of what All My Friends is, the collection plus like 3 new songs at the time. Um, and so that came out, and it was great because now we had kind of more stuff to play off of, because the songs, they're not very long. Some songs are 30 seconds, some songs are 2 minutes. So it was great to have enough stuff to actually play out, and not just have like a 10-minute show, 15-minute shows, which some of them were when we first started out because we just didn't have songs. And so, yeah, it was really great putting that collection together.
And that's the move, right? Like, do a demo, do a couple 7 inches, and then just toss everything on a record with like some extra songs. Like that's the ultimate punk hardcore format, I think.
Yeah, no, it's great because you just get everything in one shot. And I love when there's collections like that. I mean, I'm a record collector, so I still buy records, and yeah, I still buy 7 inches, but it's always nice to have those plus everything on one LP. And that was kind of the intent behind that.
So the next record that you go in to do is the DNA Will Have It Say, which is like your next EP. And
Correct.
dude, the cover art on it is so ill. I love this thing.
Yeah.
Like, what was the idea behind that?
Yeah, this guy Nick, he's a graphic artist and just really good at what he does. And he's he was working at Epitaph forever as like a graphic artist, and he was really tight with Justin and knew Wes a little bit. But he and Justin were really close. And he's like, "Oh, I know this guy. Can we, let's see what he comes up with." And that's what he came up with. And we were like, "This is so cool!" Like we loved it. Just like a rabbit with its guts pouring out, and then in front of a rainbow. We thought it just what a crazy image, and it just kind of fit kind of the vibe of the EP. We thought, and yeah, that was really awesome. And what a lot of people don't know is Karen O from Yeah Yeah Yeahs actually sings on a track on that record.
So ill. So ill.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, yeah.
I just love, not to go back to the art, but it's such a rad right turn, like, cause all the releases previously are, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong because I'm not a super fan, but it's kind of like the vibe is more Smithsy, like the artwork, and then to just come out of there with like this bright album cover is just so ill.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I know it's great. I mean, we kind of started doing that a little bit with like the All My Friends Are Going Deaf. It's like neon pink, right? And so this was kind of like a more artistic, controlled version of that, but it's super bright and pastel neon colors, and it's very uh, like misleading. Like if you didn't know anything about the band and saw it, you'd be like, "Oh, this looks cool," and you hear it, and if you're not into this type of stuff, it'll rip your ears open. So it was kind of a fun way to kind of have an artistic spin on something that like might look somewhat like warm and fuzzy, but seeing kind of guts pouring out of a rabbit on top of it, like kind of tells you what you're in for.
Yeah, I mean, the All My Friends Are Going Deaf is, you do experiment a bit with like the colors, but it's still like a two-tone dark feel, even with like the bright colors.
Yeah, and I also think too, like the band was very settled at that point. We'd already like it was a 5 piece, and it's been a solid lineup, and so that record, um, and The Range are my two favorite, and for different reasons. But I think the reason why I like the DNA so much, the 7 inch so much, is because the band was so cohesive at that point. Like we knew what we were doing, we knew what we were about, we knew what we were doing sonically and artistically. That it just really gelled in that record, I thought.
And is the reason for The Rain standing out for you just because it's like the original intent of the band?
Yeah, yeah, because it was just three people in a room for like 4 or 5 hours, just churning and churning out riffs, and I just remember sitting there in Sal's practice studio that had a reel to reel in it, 16th inch tape, or quarter-inch tape, sorry, and I'm just like cycling through riffs, and then at one point, like Wes and Sal kind of look up and they're like, "That's it, like that's that's what we're gonna do." And then I just kind of built on that, and then we were able to kind of hammer it out, and that's kind of how the demo came out. And then the Rains definitely was an extension of that same manic type of vibe, and that's why like the Rains was my favorite, because that, to your point, that was the original intent of the band, was to always have that like manic, unpolished. Like it might sound simple, but it's not. There's it's very erratic, and that 7-inch really captured that.
Yeah, I mean, sounds simple is the ultimate like paradox in punk and hardcore, right? It's like you listen to the Ramones, it sounds simple. You listen to Infest, it sounds simple. So like you try to do it, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any standout shows with this band that you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, again, like playing CBs was great. Baltimore was fantastic. We played at the Auto Bar, and that show was really, really, really solid. And then we had like great shows in Europe, touring over there, and uh, shows in Birmingham. Was insane. We were late, almost late to the show. Well, we were late to the show. There was just an ungodly amount of traffic backed up on the freeway there, and we were like, we're not going to make the show. Like, we're stuck. And our driver was like, I'm just going to drive in the emergency lane, and he drove in the emergency lane for like 30 minutes and completely skirted around this like end to end full stop. I mean, people were like out of their cars, like type stopped traffic. I don't know I don't remember really why the traffic was stopped, but no one was moving. And our driver's like, if we don't leave, we're going to be stuck here for another like 3 hours at least, and we're not going to make the show. And it was this festival in Birmingham. And he drove in the emergency lane. We skirted around the traffic. People were honking, super pissed off. And how we didn't get stopped by the police or anything, I have no idea. But we got around it, and then called the promoter and just said, we're going to be late, but we're going to make it in time. And we pulled up, and they said, the band that was playing before you just took their stuff off stage. So we like parked, and we're driving from France, and drove all day from France, and took the ferry over, and then drove all the way to Birmingham, and got to the venue, opened up, and then loaded on stage and started playing. Like, it was so bonkers. So that type of stuff was like kind of sticks out. And I remember our show in Leeds was really, really good. Like a really good turnout and super like rabid show. So yeah, there's definitely some standout stuff that happened with that band in some of our touring that we've done.
You have like kind of a special connection with like the UK also, right? Like, aren't you a big football fan?
I am very big football fan, and I started kind of watching it in the late '80s, early '90s, and through reading like a British newspaper called the Bulldog, that had like football scores and scores about football. So yeah, I started following it back then. And, that was like a connection that Daniel and I had too with Over My Dead Body. So that was like one of the things that, we always bonded over was English football. But, so yeah, being over there with some girls was great because I got to be in this place where I hadn't been yet with any other bands that I'd been in. And so I got to go to these places and venues and areas of London and different parts of England that I'd always read about and heard about, but hadn't been to yet. And it was great to see that.
And Rob, who's your team?
Manchester United Football Club.
Yeah, don't hang up on me, but this is a Crystal Palace podcast.
Good for you.
Actually, it's a Cholos podcast, but for that league, we like Crystal Palace.
Now we're
talking. Yeah. Nah, I looked up the location of my English listeners, and Daniel said, "I think that's Crystal Palace, so that's who I support now." They're all from like one little area, but so respect. What's up, fools? And but yeah, so how do you hook up with Epitaph for the next Some Girls record?
Well, the Locust had a history with Epitaph. Obviously, put out releases with Epitaph, and from my understanding, and this is not, don't take this verbatim, but my understanding, I think Epitaph was kind of looking at American Nightmare as well, and that obviously that band broke up, and so Brett kind of was talking to Justin and kind of started talking to Wes, and then Nick, who's done artwork for us, worked there and kind of just said, hey, like, we should all meet. And so Brett invited us up to Epitaph, and it was great meeting him. Super nice guy. It was really great to meet everyone that worked there. It was cool to see the offices and the warehouse. And he just kind of said, I love what Justin's done with his bands, and I'm a fan of Wes's, and I like what you guys are doing with this band. I'm interested. What do you guys want to do? And we're like, we could put out an LP and just kind of see what happens. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And then that's how we got on Epitaph. So, I think that Justin being on the label already kind of really, really helped that relationship. And then them wanting to work with Wes anyway, like kind of furthered that. So
how do you approach the writing of the record, given that previously, like, it's just been chunks of EPs, and now you're like going in to write an LP? Is the intent behind it different?
Very, very much so. I mean, we actually demoed, like, we recorded everything in South Studio and hired an engineer / producer to help us work this. And we ended up doing it at For the Record in Orange County. And it was recorded by Alex Newport, like, super nice guy, had some interesting ideas, but it was tough in a sense, especially for Chuck and I, because we wrote all the music. And so for us, it was very, well, I don't want to do what you're telling me because that doesn't sound good for what I'm trying to do. And then, there was a little bit of that going on, being told like, oh, you can't write a song like this. You have to do it like X, Y, and Z. And Chuck and I kind of didn't really follow that with this band. It was, the intent was not to follow the rules, but with this and with Epitaph, like, you kind of have to follow the rules a little bit for what, Alex was trying to get out of us as a band. And so certain songs came out not the way I think we started to write them. And some songs came out better because of it. And some songs didn't really hit the mark. And so with Heaven's Pregnant Teen, I would say probably 70% of that record is great. There's some really good tracks on there, and they came out well. And I think Alex did a good job of pushing us a little bit to do things a little different. And other songs where he pushed us, I don't think they came out quite as well because it didn't have that as manic of a feel. It felt a little too polished, I think, some of these songs. But yeah, there was definitely a well thought out map of like, how do we write this album? Like, we actually sat there with like notebooks and recorded with Sal, and then would listen back to, the 16 track 1/4-inch reel recording that we had done everything else on as a band. And now it's like, well, this is just a demo and everything's going to be done for real at a bigger studio with an actual producer. So it was just interesting to have this sixth person kind of nudging you certain directions to try to get more out of you or to get less out of you in certain instances. So, yeah, it was the first time I think I ever truly sat there and like wrote an album.
Were the other members more receptive to like the pushback from the engineer?
Yeah, I would say that it wasn't that no one was receptive. It was just a little jarring, I think, because the band had had four releases at this point, so it was kind of like we had a way of doing things, and now it's like, well, that's not how you do it all the time. You need to do a little bit of this and take out a little bit of that to make this work better. And I don't. I would say that no one was pissed and no one was mad. It wasn't like there was anything heated going on. It was just, I would say, jarring a little bit. Um, but I would say Chuck and I probably took it more than everyone. And then, when we were recording, it got really rough a couple times. Like, I think Sal's arms were going to fall off at one point, having to redo this drum part that was just so gnarly. And even despite Pro Tools, Alex was like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And Sal's like, my arm is going to fall off. And so it's just kind of one of those things where you get pushed, and I think sometimes you get pushed so hard that it's just not working. And you kind of have to go back to that song later or something. So, yeah, but overall, it was a good experience.
At what point do you decide that you're going to leave the band?
So this was tough because, the album hadn't come out yet, and my job that I had in San Diego was moving to Plano, Texas, and I wasn't going to move to Plano, and so I was trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? And Wes and Justin were like, well, we want to just go for it and see how far we can take it with this album and this band and touring and see where it lands us. And I was like, I can't take that chance. And I got this new career in fraud prevention for e-commerce, and I'm pretty good at it, and I'm worried that if I don't stick with it and I do the band stuff, like, I'm going to be left empty-handed in like 5 years, wondering why didn't I take this other job. So it was totally mutual, totally amicable. It was like, hey, I'll finish my guitar parts, and I ended up getting a job in Seattle during this whole time this was happening. So I had about a month off in between my jobs in San Diego and Seattle. And so we just continued to write the record because I had a lot of free time. And I finished my guitar parts, and the day after, my dad helped me load up my car, and then drove up to Seattle.
And what's wrong with Plano, Texas? Shout out Plano, Texas hardcore.
Nothing's wrong with Plano, Texas, if that's where you want to live. It's just like, I'm born and raised in San Diego, and I just like I like Seattle a lot, and I had a bunch of friends up there, and I'm like, well, this is a great opportunity. I get to go move in a city that I love, and I have a bunch of friends up there, so this works out perfect, And I didn't know anyone in Plano, Texas, so shout out Plano, Texas. Sorry, I don't know anyone there.
Shout out. They would have loved to have you, dude. Could have really turned around the vibe of the city,
You never know.
You never know. What could have been. So pretty much immediately when you get to Seattle, you do a project called The Vows. And this 7-inch fucking rips. What the fuck, Rob? Like, where do you pull this out of? Like this, Unbroken aside, which is like pretty untouchable. Like, we're all aware of that project. Like, this is something special, I think, that is like kind of under the radar. What's up with The Vows? How do you do this, and what do you feel about this project?
I love that 7-inch very much because I got to play, again with like friends, and it was kind of just hardcore. Kind of had a little bit of a undertow, a little bit of amenity vibe to it, and that started because I was hanging out with Murph and Pettibone from Undertow all, pretty often. And I was like, we should do a band together. And they're like, yeah. And then we had this idea, like, oh, wonder if we do a straight edge band called The Vows, and everyone has to have been straight edge for at least 10 years. Um, and then we recruited, I was friends with the Ram and friends with Posy Chris, and we were like, hey, we're doing this band. Are you guys interested? And so, we have a couple songs. We're probably ready to write a couple more and just do like a 3 or 4 song 7-inch. And, Indecision's going to put it out. And that's how that band kind of came about. And so we had a few practices and then went into the studio, and we went in there with like 2.5 songs, and we kind of had to write the rest. And I just remember Ram going, I can't ever write music like that again. Like it frazzled him because it was so like panicky, because you're like trying to like finish songs to get ready to record the next day, and you're like, how is this going to work? Like, how is this going to sound? And I I think it was a little nerve wracking for him. But yeah, in the end, we had a blast, and we got to play some great shows. And we got to play with Sick of It All, got to play with GB, we got to play some house shows, and we would do those 4 songs from the record, and then we'd do like 2 or 3 covers, as the set, and it was great. Like I loved playing with those guys. I loved that record, and I wish we could have done more. And what was interesting, I would say like 7, 8 months ago, there was kind of a text thread with all of us, and we were all kind of talking like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to like go back and like record like another 7-inch or something, and try to do some shows. And obviously distance and lockdowns and everything else kind of put the brakes on that. But yeah, it was a great band. Like I loved it.
What covers did you guys do?
Just different stuff, like Slapshot covers, and I think we did Stick of It All cover maybe. Yeah, we did a few different covers, and yeah, it was just fun.
I'm
Super fun.
just so curious, just because that 7-inch rips. So I was just curious what direction you go with the covers. But
Yeah.
yeah. And then a couple years later, you do. Well, first off, why does that band break up then? Anyway, like it should still be going. Come on, 4 songs.
Murph, Murph was moving. Got a job offer in the Midwest, so he was moving, and Pettibone, was having a kid, and it was just busy, and time and life happens, and it was just kind of like, yeah, that was fun. We put out a 7-inch and got to play 4 or 5 cool shows, and great, and then that was kind of it. And but yeah, I wish we could have done more. I wish we had time to do more. But yeah, it just never happened. But it was definitely a really, really fun band to be in.
A couple years later, you start doing a project called Narrows. How does this come about?
That comes about in a kind of a crazy way, because Jody, who lives in London, was a booking agent for many years, and done all kinds of bands, and Godflesh and Earth and whatever, just like a bunch of different bands. And he did the Some Girl shows in the UK when we first went over there, and he and I just hit it off and just always kind of loosely stayed in touch via email and stuff. And Ryan from These Arms Are Snakes was like, "Oh, hey, Jody's coming to town," and I was like, "Oh, great!" Like, so I hit up Jody. I was like, "We should do a band together." And he's like, "How?" I'm like, "I don't know. We'll figure it out." When I just said, "How long are you going to be in town?" He's like, "Oh, probably a couple of weeks." I'm like, "Oh, we can do this." And Dave Varela and I, I'm a huge Botch fan, and he was into Unbroken, and we just hung out a lot, pretty often, and just always talked about it'll be fun to do a band together someday. And I was like, hey, here's what's going on. Like, Jody's coming out, Ryan's interested in playing too. My friend Sam from San Diego, he's a pretty good drummer. Like, we can get him to play drums. and maybe we can record a 7-inch or something. And he's like, yeah, sure. So we rented a practice space, or we went to These Arms of Snakes practice spot, and Ryan and I kind of worked on a few riffs here and there when Jody first got to town at my house, and just kind of boombox recorded them like on our phones, and then took that and went to practice space and then wrote the 7-inch there. And then Ben Verellen, Dave's younger brother, recorded the EP. And that's how that band started.
It's pretty interesting, the sound. Like, what are you going for?
I think it just kind of like heavy, trying to use Dave's voice as a weapon, basically. Like, what can we do to complement his voice? Like, to make some heavy riffs and just let him, like, just unleash his voice on these songs. And that's kind of the vibe of it. And Ryan's an incredible guitar player. He's like writes a lot of abstract notes, and he uses a lot of effects. And it's like, how do we layer this straightforwardness, like pissed off hardcore, like freight train hardcore, mixed with like Ryan's like abstract music notes and leads and effects, and we kind of just married those sounds together, and kind of sounds like a beautiful freight train is kind of how like I describe that EP, because there's a beauty to that record, but there's also like you're gonna get smashed by it because it's so heavy and Dave's voice is so gnarly. And I think that first 7 inches is killer.
Is that your favorite record that the band does?
No, but I like it a lot.
Okay, so you do the LP next, which is New Distance, and is the approach? I mean, it's obviously different. You're going to do an LP, and I think that like for a band like this, it lends itself more to an LP. Like I just, when bands are out of the straightforward hardcore lane, I like it in a bigger chunk, because if you're going to get crazy, it's like I want a big palette of it. Like, if you're gonna take me there, take me there. I wanna take the ride. And I don't know. I feel that you really accomplished it with this LP. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's a perfect description. Like, it's kind of like, let's get a little strange, but let's still be heavy, and kind of like everything is like rooted in hardcore. And I felt that you hear a little bit of all of us in it. You hear a little bit of These Arms of Snakes. You hear a little bit of Botch, a little bit of Unbroken. And you get to hear some straightforward, like heavy playing from Jody and Sam. And I felt that this was a really good representation of the band. There's like certain songs are better than others. I think there's certain things about the recording that could have been better, but I still like the record a lot. Like, and I think that record really represented the band of like, hey, like we're heavy, but we can get a little weird. And I don't know, I felt it really worked out with that album.
How do you feel about Discogs labeling you as math rock?
I don't know. Is Discogs even like correct? It seems like whenever I listen to your podcast or other people's podcasts, there's a lot of arguments about Discogs. So is it really the source of truth?
No, it's the Wikipedia of record collecting. Anyone can anyone can edit anything. So some asshole labeled you as math rock. Who the fuck were you? Come on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely some odd time signatures here and there, but I don't think we were that mathy compared to someone like Botch or like These Arms of Snakes, where there's truly like mathematical algebra going on in some of their cadence and some of their time signatures, where this had a little bit of that, but very little. Some songs definitely had it and some songs didn't have it at all. So I don't know. I don't know if we would be that mathy.
Although you do have back-to-back tracks that clock in at 2 minutes and 49 seconds. How do you pull that off? What the fuck?
Yeah, I never knew that.
Now you do. 185, motherfucker. All right. Yeah. So What are your lasting memories of this band, and how do you feel about it, like in your catalog?
Yeah, I love it. I do enjoy every record we've done. I don't think there's anything that like sucks, at least in my opinion, that we had with this band. Like I'm really proud of it. I mean, especially the second LP. Um, it's really, really solid and really angry and just so brutal. And and it's totally different from New Distance. And you could tell it's the same band, like the DNA is there, but it's just so much more brutal. I really love the second album, but I think, we had great shows. We got to go to Europe a few times. We toured the States a few times and had really good shows, like always did really well in like New York and Chicago and Boston, Richmond, etc. Really good shows. And, yeah, I'm very proud of that band
What was
and
the
what we were able to.
go? Sorry, Rob, for cutting you off. What was the idea behind the artwork on the second record, on the painted LP?
Yeah, I mean, it was, Ryan always did all the artwork. He was a very talented graphic artist. And, his whole thing was just like, like ugly, melted, painted face. It's just kind of like painted and, that it's about masks and what you have on your face. Is it real? How you portray yourself to people, is it real? It's kind of like that, like ugliness behind people, was kind of the intent behind that.
Yeah, it's like half like Dia de los Muertos and then like half black metal. It's wild.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
definitely. Dia de los Muertos things is definitely like a big part of it for sure.
and I also just love like that it's like so clean, like the makeup, that like the body is like a very normal human body, and then like the artwork is all zany, so like the juxtaposition between like this plain no tattooed body and like a crazy artwork on the face is pretty wild. It's striking. It's just
Yeah.
a nice piece of art.
Well, what that is that's an actual person that posed for that photo for the album,
Of course.
and yeah, and he, did some amazing uh, graphic work on that album. Yeah, and I agree. Like, I love how clean it is, but then it's like really uh, stark and fucked up looking at the same time.
Yeah, it's like you can look at it as like a clean looking piece of art, or you can like dig into it and have it look kind of crazy and ugly.
Yeah,
It is striking.
yeah,
What?
yeah. And that record was really tough to write. Like um, we had a very limited timeline and we had to get it out just because there was tours coming and other things going on, and we only had like 5 songs for it. And so we got to the studio and just hammered out the rest of it, in the studio. And it was a really tough record to write, but in the end it ended up being um, super super well put together. I'm really proud of that album.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Like just the approach of writing things with like planning them out and overworking them compared to doing them under pressure. Like what do you think is the move, and what has been the output from those different approaches?
I mean, I think it depends on like what you're trying to do. With this band, it was really hard because Sam and I lived in San Diego, Dave and Ryan lived in Seattle, and Jody lives in London. So everything was done via email, sending MP3s around. I have this riff. I mean, it was just like riffs galore, constantly listening to song ideas. And then eventually, and what we would do is we would always do a tour because that brings Jody out here for his visa. So we would do the tour, and then we would, at the end of the tour, we would go into a practice space and hammer out the songs as best we could, and then go to the studio. And I think with New Distances, we had a lot of time to do that and really be methodical about what we were doing and the intent behind it. Where with Painted, it was we did a tour we, the day after the tour, went straight into the studio with 5 songs. It's clearly not enough for an album. And so we ended up having to write the rest of the record in the studio. And maybe we only had 4 songs. I take that back. I think we only had half the album written. So we ended up going in the studio and telling the engineer, just kind of roll tape along the way when we tell you, just so we can hear back like what we're writing and kind of figure out how these parts go together. And then Jody was Skyping in and playing guitar riffs, and then we would kind of hear that, and then we would go to back into the studio and try to recreate what he was doing via Skype. So it was really hard to write that record. And so, but I think, to your question around like what's the move? Is it rehearsal, and then putting out something, or is it you just get in there and bang it out and you vibe it out, and what feels good, that's the record. And yes, you need to practice, and yes, you kind of have to have a vague foundation of what you're doing. You can't just go in blind with nothing. But I prefer to do more off the cuff. I prefer to have it more manic and like under the wire, or to the wire. Just that where if you don't get this done today, like you will not have an album because the studio's booked. Everything's all the dominoes are starting to move forward, and you have to like be the domino to fall over and get your record out and be part of that machine, or be part of that process. And so for me personally, I like to write under pressure. I like to do everything at the last minute because it just comes out, and that's a lot of my best stuff has come out that way. When I try to overthink and overwrite and just sit there and marinate on a riff over and over and over, or marinate on ideas over and over, I feel like I get lost in it and I lose it, and it's no longer a feeling, it's a job. And I like to write with feeling, and part of that feeling is manic pressure, manic necessity. Like I have to get this done, and there's no choice, and it forces creativity for me. And so that's how I like to write. And it's hard because not everyone likes to write that way.
Right. But the manic thing works only if you've already crafted the intent, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. If you say, this is what we're going to do, and that's kind of what I talked about, is like you can't just go in blind and have nothing. You kind of have to have a foundation for what you're doing, right? Just
Right.
like song ideas on phones, or song ideas on your laptop, whatever it is. You have to have some rough network or a rough pattern of ideas to stitch together in the studio. And that's always what I've liked to do. I find the process of hammering something out over and over and over, like then when you go to record it, like I always feel that the feeling's gone. It becomes very mechanical, and because you're just like you're doing something via repetition. Like we've practiced this song 50 times in the practice space. Now we feel we're tight enough to go record it, and then you go and record it. But at that point, it's just this like repetition, mechanical way of doing things. And I get it. That works for a lot of people. Obviously, there's hundreds of thousands of great songs that were written this way. But for me personally, I like we could practice and kind of have some rough ideas, and let's just go in there and hammer it out. Like, that's what I like. Like the engineer sitting there kind of impatient, like, that just adds to the pressure because they're just sitting there like, when am I supposed to hit record? And so you have pressure coming from different angles, and that always feels good to me because it like forces the creativity out. And that's like, but it's hard sometimes for people.
Why does this band end, or is it open-ended? Might there be another Narrows record?
It's kind of open-ended. I mean, we never fully broke up. We just kind of stopped playing, and we, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, kind of started writing some more songs and kind of kicking around some ideas. And then last year we actually played a couple shows, in Seattle and Tacoma. Went and played a festival in Seattle, and then the next night played like a small show in Tacoma. And so the band it's not done, but it's definitely like this like long hiatus, especially now, right? Like there's nothing going on right now to where that would allow us to do anything anyway. So, but yeah, we talk about maybe doing some stuff again someday, but for now it's just kind of hung up.
Yeah, it just seems like kind of timeless, where it's like a project that you could just do indefinitely.
Yeah, yeah. If it feels good, then just do it. And I mean, we still talk all the time, and still close. I actually, right before this interview, I was actually just texting with Jody in London. So like it's great that we're still talking, and obviously Sam and I are partners at the coffee shop. So um, those friendships are still there. So it's not anything like that. It's just life and time more than anything got in the way.
Do you do anything between Narrows and SS Warhead
Um,
musically?
no, I mean, not really. Kind of kick around a few things here and there. Something I did do that I realized is, during Some Girls, when Wes was going to move back to Boston, he had this idea of a band called Exoskeletons, and I played bass on some of those songs on that project that he worked on. And that was something that happened kind of in between Some Girls and Narrows. And but yeah, post Narrows, like, or even I haven't really done anything. It was like, got married, had a kid, opened up the coffee shop, and and work and everything else is just like too busy to play music. So I'm like more of a fan at this point and just go to shows when I can, and help out with shows here and there. But yeah, SS Warhead was like one of the last things I've done outside of Narrows.
And it's a ripper. Like, again, just like Vows, like you come out with it. Like, what's up? Still here, fool.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? So Narrows was going to tour in Europe, and we were flying into Prague, and we had 3 days off. So Sam and Jason from Spark Marker was playing second guitar for us at the time for that particular tour because Ryan couldn't make it. So Jason filled in on second guitar for that tour, and we were like, we should do some crazy fucking DB type stuff. And Thomas, who's our driver, in based in Prague, and we're like, hey, do you want to sing for this? And do you have access to a studio? And he's like, yeah. And we had some very loose ideas. Like we um, landed in Prague. The next day went to a practice space and we just kind of hammered out some ideas. And then the day after that, we went to the studio and ripped out 4 songs in that day in like 7 hours. It was done. And it was so crazy because we could only do it once because that night after we were recording, the Narrows tour started in Prague. And so we recorded in the day and then went to the venue, did sound check, and then the Narrows tour started, and then we left on tour. So we only had like those 6 hours at the studio to pull this off. And again, that goes down to the manic, frantic pace of, look, we have some loose song ideas, let's stitch it together, and then everything else we're just going to make up in the studio. And that's exactly what we did, and that's how that EP came out. And I fucking love that record. It is so gnarly and so brutal and just great TV crust type stuff. Like, and so again, that's like how I like to write. And thankfully, Sam was used to that, and Jason was pretty malleable to it, and it just worked out.
Yeah, it comes out in 2016 on Indecision. And I want to do a quick sidebar because he's so important to me as well. But like, how rad is it to have someone like Dave that like supports your projects? Like, you can do something like this project that's really a snapshot in time, and it's like an idea coming from you as like a creative force, and to know that it has like a landing ground in someone that like believes in your full musical journey. Like, isn't that
It's
fucking amazing?
awesome. It's awesome. I mean, I've known Dave for 25 years, 30 years, maybe at this point. I think I met him in like 90, 91, something like that. So yeah, I've known Dave for a very long time, and we've always been close. I mean, we lived together for almost 3 years and had a great time. And um, for me, it's just amazing to see what his label's done. Right, it started out just small and just little by little, and being able to do all these things. Um, I just, I'm so proud of him of what he's done, because by and large, he's done it mostly by himself. He's had some help here and there, but he's mostly done it by himself. And it's incredible to see what the labels become. And those discographies are awesome, like the Instead stuff and just everything else that he's done, Undertow, the rules. He's a great, great guy.
Yeah, shout out to Dave Ito as well.
Yeah, of course. Love
Yeah,
Ito.
and that's a great segue, because to end on this, I wanted to touch on this stuff, because Indecision, they do the Unbroken re-releases. Let's touch on those, but also we need to talk about the Unbroken reunion. Um, and this is hard to talk about, and so if you want me to cut it out or you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. Um, but can we talk about the Unbroken reunion, like why this happens and so forth?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, everyone knows Eric passed away and, unfortunately took his own life, and kind of upended everyone around him for it. And, he was in a bad way. And, yeah, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. And I think that yeah, it's sad, still, I mean, it's many years on and it's still a bummer, and, um, even still talking to his mom and talking to his brother sometimes. And it just fucking sucks, that he's not here, especially how talented he was. And, so Eric passed away, and obviously there's expenses and funeral costs and everything else. And, his mom, they just family just it's not like they have a bunch of money or anything. And so, we're like, let's play a show and then we'll donate all the money to Eric's family. And so, we were kind of kicking around the idea, like, do we or do we not get a second guitar player? And we just decided, like, no, we just can't do it. And so we decided to play it as a 4-piece. And originally it was going to be booked at the Showcase Theater. And Izat, who I was like, I don't know, somehow we just like always hit it off. And um, at the time, he had a Showcase San Diego. And for like a couple years, I ran a goth industrial club out of there. That was something I did in between those kind of lost years of not playing in hardcore. I was like doing a goth industrial club for a few years at the Showcase San Diego. So, Izot was there all the time, and we just knew each other because I would go to shows at Spanky's and obviously play the Showcase. So we were always on great terms. And, I told him what happened. He's like, oh, that's sad. And I said, we were thinking about maybe doing it at the Showcase. And he's like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's too big. You'd probably have to play like 2 or 3 shows. And, I'm getting access to this new venue called the San Bernardino Arena. They used to do like boxing and wrestling and stuff out there. Um, and it holds like a couple thousand people, like 1,800 people. You might want to think about doing it. And I was like, I don't think that many people are going to show up. And he was like, I think they will. And so we took a chance, and yeah, like 1,800 people showed up, and it was bonkers, and it's like, we wanted bands, that Outspoken to be there was important because Eric loved Outspoken, and it was one of the reasons we ended up on New Age. So it was important to make that happen. And to this day, I'm still very appreciative that, Mike and Dennis and John and all those guys did it. because I know that would have meant a lot to Eric, that Outspoken got back together to play for him. And, Crimson Curse, just because it was wild, crazy San Diego stuff, and I knew it would be weird. But then we wanted to have a couple new bands, that people have never heard of, just to like open the show, because to give these like new bands a chance to play in front of a bunch of people, and kind of give back to the scene a little bit. And then, we had a few expenses to pay out for, flying people in and, production costs, et cetera. But everything left over, like we gave to Eric's family to pay for, to pay back like funeral costs and things like that.
How did it feel having that many people come out?
It's shocking and terrifying and sad and happy and awesome and terrible at the same time, because the only reason we were doing it is because of what happened. And it just was like terrible feeling of like, why we're playing this show because he died. We're not playing it because we're stoked to be playing, because we never had intentions of getting back together and playing shows. I mean, we did the band and it was great, and we just kind of left it alone. And, about 3.5 years after we broke up, that happened. And so that's, it was a whole gamut of emotions. I'm glad we did it in the end, because it was a beautiful thing, especially looking back on the video that our friend John made of it. It was an incredible moment, I thought. And it was really beautiful to see that many people come out, especially when Dave said, can we have a moment of silence for Eric? To have 1,800 people just be silent was just like, just chills, So it just felt that people, at that moment, it felt that everyone was there for the right reasons. And like, it felt good, kind of got over that, like, why are we doing this? And as soon as like it was just dead silent, like all those nerves of like, why are we doing this, completely went away. It just felt right at that point.
Yeah, and Unbroken is like, I don't know, I never got to see you on the first run. This is like the time I saw you. But it seems like there's so much emotion pouring into the songs and playing anyway. How did it feel different, like this night back, compared to like when you're firing on all cylinders? It's just a wall of emotion, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a flood of everything. Of like, I remember playing certain songs and just staring out in the crowd, and just like, there's certain parts that were very vivid to me. And I remember this one part, and we're playing D4, and which is that quiet breakdown part. And I just remember playing that part and just having this like blank feeling, and all I could think about was Eric that whole time in that slow part, just thinking about him in that part. And it just was like beautiful and gut wrenching at the same time. And those certain things like that would happen like throughout the show, or just seeing how many friends came out and family came out to support. It was an incredible wave of emotions for sure.
How did the idea come about for doing the reissues?
Like New Age wasn't really kind of going anymore. And, we were like, hey, we should put this stuff back in print. And Dave's like, I'm willing to do a reissue. Like, let's put out, a couple things. We can put out, stuff on CD, stuff on vinyl. And so that's kind of how it came about. And, Dave, because it's like the band felt very special, but after Eric's passing, everything kind of felt a little extra. So when you're taking these things that someone was a big part of, and you want to make sure like it's treated right, and like, not that Mike didn't treat it right. It's just like the label wasn't really going at this time, and things were kind of going in and out of print. So we decided, let's just give everything to Dave, and let him kind of curate and maintain kind of this like museum of of music, um, in a way that kind of works for everybody. And that's kind of how it came about with the reissue. So we decided to do one with like a collection of 7 inches and comps and stuff. Um, and then, do one with both albums on one CD. And that's kind of how it all came about originally.
Yeah, they're 3 years apart. So in 2000, It's Getting Tougher to Say the Right Things, which is the re-release of the 7-inch and the comp tracks. And then in '03, you do The Death of a True Spirit, which is both LPs. And then in 2010, you toss everything together, and it's the illest.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
feel?
I love how the box set came out. I
Yeah,
love it.
and it's a, I don't know. I think you already said it. It's just I love the idea of keeping things in print, right? Like timeless stuff. Like let's make a timeless release. Um, can you talk anything about like doing the layout stuff or how you want to curate this? Like all these different
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it came out because we started playing shows again. Right. And so we did that Burning Fight festival, and it came down to, we weren't going to play, and we get asked all the time to play this fest, that fest, and, oh, we'll pay you this, fly out. And we're like, no, because it just was never really about money. And our friend Jim Grimes and some other people were like, hey, we're putting together this fest, and it's kind of being built around this book. And, it's going to be in Chicago. We've always liked Jim a ton. But he was the first person that kind of ever approached it of, hey, if you guys want to play the show, like we'll create some sort of benefit that you guys want to give money to. Like we'll just pay for flights and, hotel for a couple nights. And then all the money left over we'll donate to a local charity. And that kind of was the first time someone said, like, this is what we want to do. And most of the times, like, we'll give you, X amount of thousands. And it's like, well, that doesn't matter to us, and Jim went about it the right way. And we thought about it long and hard and finally decided, like, okay, if you're going to give this money to charity, like, we'll fucking do it. And that kind of spurned the, like, well, we need to, like, actually put together, like, a vinyl box set of, like, and how do we go about it? And I found this, like, soul record that had, like, a triple layout. And I said, well, we can fit everything over 3 LPs and we can do a layout like this. And so Dave took it to Pirate Press and they figured out how to like ape that record and that layout. And so you can do a triple LP in with a double spine sleeve. And so, yeah, the design work that went into it, and we decided that we wanted to do a Burning Fight LA where we curated again, like some bands that we played with back in the day, bringing down Undertow and um, just having different bands play Festival of Dead Deer, just to make it interesting because that's when we would play shows, they were always really eclectic. And so we wanted to kind of keep that going. And again, just like we just, after expenses, like donated the money to charity. And a lot of people don't know that we did that because we weren't talking about it. So, pretty much every show we played, that the money went to someone else. And so we never really talked about it, but there was always a lot of like, oh, you're just, you know, getting a paycheck and blah, 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 blah. But I mean, and even if we were getting a paycheck, it's not like we're raking in millions. We're not fucking, Motley Crue or something, So I think that, so we decided like, hey, if we're going to play these shows, like let's put together something special for the show. So we put out the gray one, which was only for the Glass House show, basically. So we put out, and then in the meantime, we were working on like a more long-term version that was just going to be a standard version available. And every time we played different union shows, we would press a different color to take to that region with us.
How did it feel to play again?
It was great. It's hard, I think, emotionally, like just given what the output is like emotionally for that band. It's really hard. I mean, especially when, you know, we were like playing in Tokyo and in Japan, and like kids were coming up and just like crying and hugging, and people were telling us like, oh, you know, when you play, you know, in Japan, like kids are polite and, you know, they'll go off, but they kind of just chill. And in between bands, and people were like yelling and hugging us and like crying, and it was, I don't know, it was draining. And I remember calling my wife and being like, I can't do this anymore. This is so draining, like emotionally. Like I am like crying on the phone because these kids are crying to me, or these grown men are crying to me. And it just like blows your mind. And it was beautiful and heart wrenching and, emotionally draining, but it was great to play places, you know, play London and play Prague again, and play all these places, and people that you hadn't seen in a long time came out of the woodworks to be at the shows, and they would bring their kids to the show, and there was a lot of that, and so it made it all worth it because we kind of got to, like, I felt like recreate what it was like when we first toured through, only on a slightly bigger scale. But it was really really cool, um, to play the reunion shows and kind of space them out and just do one, like in various pockets, instead of trying to do like a whole tour. Yeah.
Can you talk about why it was important to do a Shea show as well?
Um, because that place was everything to me growing up. I booked my first shows there. I went to a lot of my, you know, formative years as a high school kid. I went to a ton of shows at the Shea, and so it was important. And when we played, a lot of people don't know this, but you know, they were in a lot of financial trouble at the time, and so we played the show and like donated like $4,000 or $5,000 from that night to the Shea, you know, to help them out. And that's why we played the Shea, and that's why it was important, and that's why like that venue matters, because it's a safe space for people, no matter who you are, to come and have fun and enjoy music of all different types. And yeah, there's a lot of punk and hardcore shows there, but there's other stuff going on there too. And for us, it was important to play there because we all grew up going there, and it felt right to play there. And it was a secret show. We didn't tell anyone till the day of, that first time. And, you know, the bands kept it quiet. You know, we never really said anything. And it was like at noon that day, we just said, we're playing at the Shea tonight. And a shitload of people showed up. And it was great, because it generated a ton of money for the Shea, and we had a great time playing.
Okay, to wrap it up, without you talking about them playing in Pomona and making me jealous for like one of my top 5 show regrets of not going to, can you talk about booking Negative Approach at the Shea?
That is one of my favorite shows I've ever booked, because they're my favorite hardcore band of all time. Like them and 7 Seconds are my 2 favorite hardcore bands. And, you know, I knew Ron Martinez a little bit, just from being around and things. And so Spencer and I would always reach out to him. Like, we really want NA to play the Shea. We really want NA to play the Shea. No. You know, you guys, you know, you have your $5 tickets, and it's like, it's so expensive to get these guys to come out. And, you know, it has to be done on a tour run. And then there's, you know, so it was just hard. We tried for a few years to get them to come out. And then one day I just told Spencer, I was like, look, I don't care if I have to pay out of my own pocket to meet the guarantee, but we need to freaking do this. And so, you know, Spencer reached out to Ron, and we're like, look, we'll do a $20 ticket and we'll meet whatever guarantee like that you need. And Ron said, okay, like they're coming out, so we'll add Shea Stop on this tour. And it fucking worked out. And I could not believe that Negative Approach was playing the Shea Cafe, because not only are they my favorite band, and I got to see them a couple years prior to that Shea show, in Pomona.
You're supposed to not bring that up. What the fuck?
I can't help it because that's the best show I've ever seen in my life.
God damn it.
And that's a fact. Ask Mandel; he'll probably back me up on that. But it was important because we got to have a couple local bands open. I think Greg's band, Clocked In, opened that show, and so I don't know. It was just great to have a couple locals play, have Negative Approach play, and people were just going berserk, like me included. Like I lost my mind when they played because it's just what you do when Negative Approach plays. But you're like going crazy and getting hit by Joe from Infest and seeing that guy lose his mind to Negative Approach, and you're just like, this is such a great feeling. Spencer and I were so psyched that we pulled that off, and I wish we could bring it back. Hopefully one day we can, but yeah, it was an incredible night.
Yeah, I'm forever indebted for that show. I love it. Top 5.
Yeah, it was great. Not as good as Pomona though.
Fucking asshole. This dude, I mean, I can count on my hands. Like, I never got to see Warzone. Could have, but like the one time I could have seen him in Santa Barbara, it got canceled like day of the show. And it's like, I didn't have a way to go to Showcase. So regret it. That Pomona show, I have no fucking excuse. I think I was just washed up and living in San Diego and didn't want to drive. And so I'm the true asshole, and then I've still never seen Cox Bar. I should have gone and seen them because they played the same spot as the Unbroken reunion once. And I was like, I don't want to go to a show that big. And now, like, this many years later, I'm like, why the fuck didn't I go see Cox Bar? God damn it.
Yeah, they never came back to SoCal after that.
I know. And it's like, well, I know. Every time I see them playing punk rock bowling, I'm like, should I go? I don't know. But yeah. I'm going next time they play after COVID. That's the number one fucking band I'm going to see. Wherever they are, I'm flying. But
yeah, we're all moshing to the opening bands, man. Every band's going to get a stage dive when COVID's over.
I know. The first show back has to be the Vows, dude. What the fuck? I'll be in the pit. But Rob, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. I feel that I don't know. Was this exciting? Was it good? Was I well represented? I don't even know. It's so late, but yeah, I don't think there's anything else to chat about. I mean, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, I feel good about this.
Yeah, it was great.
For a part 2, it's the best one. I haven't done one yet. So I really appreciate your time, and I know everyone loved to hear having you on the first time. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this again. And you're very important to the podcast. So you're one of the early Patreons, gotta say. And
I am.
Yeah, for sure. And it's important to have like people that you love and respect, like support your projects. That's why I wanted to mention like Mandel. It's important to feel that support from people you like and respect, and that's what keeps things like this going. So much thanks to you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having this podcast. I love it. I love hearing old hardcore stories from everybody and from people I don't even know. I mean, that Steve Larson interview, my God, I could listen to him go for like 2 more hours compared to my boring ass. Like that interview was fantastic. Like all these things I always wondered about instead. And like he answered it all. And like, I got to learn so much about people because of your podcast. And that's why people should smash that button.
Smash it. Yeah. I mean, my favorite thing in the world is probably like people getting to know like characters from this podcast. Like when you mentioned like, oh, I love listening to episode 1, talk about this. I'm like, oh, somehow Rob knows Joe now. Like, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, yeah, the legend Joe Rivas. I mean, for me, it's like, it's just really cool because he's, around my age, but from a totally different scene. And so to kind of hear his perspective on what was going on in Oxnard at that time, people like him and Fred Hammer, like I love hearing those stories. I mean, it's a great way to document kind of the history of the scene. And for the most part in Southern California, it's great.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for your time. Do you feel like you've been well represented on your second episode?
I do. Hopefully it's not too much to consume.
No.
This is a long one.
We're at a little under 2, so we're right in the money spot.
Okay, good. Yeah, as long as it doesn't go over 2.
Yeah, as long as it's not 3 hours of Youth Crew, we're okay.
Who the fuck wants to listen to that
shit? Yeah. All right, Rob. Thanks so much for your time.
Hold on. Unless you're talking about side by side, then you can talk about Youth Crew all day. The side by side, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
3 hours on side by side, I'm good with it.
The whole Jules catalog. That only got 7 inches. Pretty untouchable too.
It's a ripper.
Yeah, man. All right, Rob. Thanks for your time.
All right, man. Yeah, take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.